Yeah. Patrick, are we live?
Good evening. It is 6:34 p.m. and I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to our January 22nd, 2025 regular meeting. We are thankful that you have chosen to attend in person, and or virtually. This is our last full meeting of January and we have quite a full agenda tonight. I am grateful for the staff that has worked hard to prepare their reports and for all the information that they have given us as a board, and I look forward to hearing from some of them this evening. Before we start, I would like to take a moment to thank our buildings and grounds crew and our transportation department for helping us to get up and running and stay up and running during this very interesting weather week. York County reported negative 14 degrees this morning at its airport, and the last time we saw sustained temperatures like this was 1994. So thank you very, very much to Nate and Brian and their crew. We applaud you all for all of your efforts. We did have a need for executive session. Prior to this meeting this evening, in that executive session, we covered multiple legal issues that have to, or legal conversations that have to do with the district. So with that, can we please pledge allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call when you are ready, Mr. Mummer, please and thank you.
Mrs. Bauer.
Here.
Mr. Beard.
Here.
Mrs. Brennan.
Here.
Mr. Galzella.
Here.
Mr. Gelsinger.
Here.
Mr. Leidy.
Here.
Mr. Plessick.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mrs. Weaver.
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Thank you. We have 3 visitors that have signed in this evening. Thank you very much for doing that. We will make sure that this information gets filed with the minutes, and we will have an opportunity 2 times through the agenda for you to speak if you so wish. Okay, so in light of the distance in which the gentlemen from Crabtree and Rohrball have traveled and the distance they will have to travel to go back, we are going to have their presentation go before the proposed draft of the comprehensive plan, as they are both already on the agenda this evening. So gentlemen, when you are ready, please join us.
Thank you. We appreciate that. So good evening again. We were here just the other week, and we're going to give you the last piece of kind of our needs assessment. There's kind of 2 main portions of that. One is to look at the existing facility conditions analysis, and that really looks at everything you have in all your existing buildings. What's the condition? What does it take to get it to upgrade to today's standards, and what are the costs associated with that? Then we're going to circle back around on the housing data. We did get all the information we need from all the municipalities, and we have a conclusion on that housing data and the updated projected enrollments and the needs from a capacity standpoint. So we'll finish up with that. So we can go off to the first slide on the needs assessment. We can go forward. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of an abridged version. When we finish our study, what I'm going to review is kind of a couple chapters of what we'll have in the full booklet. And what we've done is kind of already kind of completed those 2 sections of the booklet. Mr. Osborne's going to email that to the board, but it's basically a survey of all the elementary schools that we did that talk about all the existing conditions, what state they're in, what do we recommend for upgrades, and then what are the costs of those upgrades. What you see before you is kind of a chart that you'll see in this full report that talks about life expectancy of different building materials. So this is kind of a guide we use. We use our expertise in the industry. We have our engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers walk through the buildings, take a look at everything. We talked to Mr. Osborne, and he eats, sleeps, and lives and breathes these buildings. So he has the most knowledge on them. So we pick his brain on what's working, what's not working, and kind of gather all that information to generate this report. Now, what we usually do is we'll take all the buildings across the district and say, to come up to today's standards, here's what you need to do. And then we'll say what it costs. You guys are in a little bit different situation than a lot of districts we work with, meaning you have a great comprehensive plan over the years that every 4 years you're picking off a building and you're doing a project. So we kind of know what the sequence of your next projects will be. So we know you've recently done the middle school, so we didn't evaluate that. We're only 4 years past completion of that. So, and you're in the midst of a project at the high school. So those two buildings we didn't analyze, but we focused instead on the elementary schools. And with those, we know that Park Hills is the next one on your list for renovation. So you'll see a more deep dive into that one as far as what it needs. And then your other three buildings, because we know eventually down the road, you have in your plan to renovate each one of those. We're not going to list everything that might need to be done in that renovation. In this full report, you'll see mention of that. Hey, this is something that you'll have to address in that renovation. But instead, we focused on between now and then, what are the things that may or you most likely will need or may need, so that you begin budgeting for that and plan for that accordingly. So that's what you'll see in the first three buildings here. And any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt. So starting at Bearsville, this is your most recent. So the last renovation was in 2014. The next renovation will be in 2038. And once again, this is kind of the things that you can anticipate maybe having to come across before that next renovation and undertake. So I'm going to I know you got a full agenda, go through this quickly. Once again, there's a very in-depth look at this, but certainly if there's any more things you want me to go in more detail, I can. But start with the site. We look at site building, both exterior envelope and interior conditions, and then the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. So on the site, what you'll see, what's unique with Bearsville is that there are a lot of things that'll come up on the list. Was when you did the last renovation, it was more selective. It wasn't as comprehensive as maybe a new building like in West Manheim or at Manheim, where you basically knocked down the majority of the building and built it new. So this was a lot of renovation, and there was more selection that was done for that project for budgetary reasons, most likely. So things like the parking lot and was never built and resurfaced part of that project. Most likely that's something you're gonna have to undertake between now and the next project. Moving into the interior building, there was some VCT flooring in the classrooms that weren't replaced. That's starting to separate, and you'll most likely need to start picking those off before the next project. There's some mag locks and hardware, door hardware giving you some problems. And then there's some kitchen equipment that also wasn't replaced with that renovation that you'll most likely need to handle before 2038. I want to make mention of the roof. The roof was new with that last renovation project, has a 30-year warranty, but there were some installation issues that were noted, and it's constantly giving the district problems and Mr. Osborne problems getting the warranty folks out there to cover it. But these issues keep popping up, so it's something you need to monitor that you might have to take a little more advanced step on. If not saying pay the district will have to pay money, but maybe take a little bit more active approach on that. Looking at the mechanical systems, you'll see a lot of commonalities here. Some of these deal with things that you've done in recent projects, like the high school, where you might be upgrading your phone system to an IP-based system. So going back and doing that at some of the elementary schools, looking at integration of the classroom technology, going to flat panel displays. I think some of this has already been budgeted in your master plan. Things like upgrading the LED fixtures and lighting controls. That's something that you can choose to do or not. That might be an energy savings thing, but before that next project comes along. And then the access control as well, getting that more on an IP-based system. That's your card readers. Going on the next slide, and won't go through these numbers in detail, but this will give you an overview of what each of those line items look like. And this is not to say tomorrow you need to spend $700,000 at Bearsville. It's between now and 2038. These are some of the things that you might have to budget and allocate for. Okay. Look at Manheim Elementary, a smaller list. Once again, most of this building was rebuilt as new. So from a building standpoint, everything's in really good shape. You're doing a great job of maintaining things. Carpet, just in its nature, just wears a lot quicker than most finishes, so most likely you have to do a carpet replacement there. On the MEP systems, your building automation system, tying that in with what you do with the district-wide system, that's probably something you'll want to do. There's an older hot water heater there that'll probably need replaced. The generator, When you actually did that last project, that generator was not replaced, so that'll most likely come up on the end of the life before the next renovation project in 2034. And then some of the things I already mentioned before, some of your LED fixtures, technology things at the other school. And there you'll see the cost. So $400,000 to $500,000 estimate. And one thing to note at the bottom, this isn't, obviously you have everyday maintenance filters, you might have a pump go out, or you have a motor, or you might have little things here or there. That's not included in this budget. That'll be part of Mr. Osborne's everyday working budget that he has every year for his facility, so. Looking at West Manheim, so this is next in line behind Park Hills. So original construction was 2006. The next renovation would be 2030. This is a little bit longer of a list, but some of these, we'll start with the site. This isn't necessarily a deficiency as far as existing conditions, but it's, we talked about it last meeting, your vehicular access with the drop off and the hard surface play area next to the playground. You'll see we didn't put any cost for that vehicular access because there's probably, 3 or 4 different ways to address that. We didn't want to put a number out there and have someone latch onto that. But in the building, some similar things, the carpet, a sand and resurface of the gym floor, and any kitchen equipment that might fail prior to the next renovation. On the ME mechanical systems, this is a higher dollar item. The rooftop units, they are, this building's approaching 20 years now. So when you go back to that chart, life expectancy of rooftop units is about 20 years, 20 to 25 years. So some of those you might see them going. Those are higher cost items that you'll have to just be aware of, and that you'll see that in the cost. And then some of the similar things that we already talked about with technology. So looking at the costs. So once again, older building, a little higher cost, but a lot of that ties into, you can see that rooftop unit, 400,000 to 468,000. It depends, you might not need to spend any of that. You might, make it to the next renovation, but we at least wanted to kind of bring it to the attention that there's a high likelihood that you're going to have to replace one or more of those units. And then finally, Park Hills. So this is more of that deep dive. So this is, all right, everything that needs to be addressed in that renovation project. So we'll just run through this real quick. Site, mill and resurface the paving, repair damaged concrete sidewalks and curbs. Looking at the exterior building envelope, doing a masonry restoration, clean up some repointing of joints, and just doing an overall cleaning of the brick, replace any spalled brick units. You do have some sections of EFIS that are receiving some damage from the kids. It's kind of by the gymnasium, and just EFIS in general is not meant for a commercial type building like this. So we'd recommend replacing that in the renovation project with metal panel. There's some sections of roofing that have been replaced in 2014, so we would leave those alone. But then anything that wasn't replaced, we've replaced, and then anything that's left over that's EPDM, we go to built up, so you have all one roofing system on that building. Looking at the interior building, so just kind of a full finish replacement throughout the whole building. I think the only thing maybe we would probably leave is the Trazo in your hallways is in good condition, and some of your ceramic wall tile is in good condition, but pretty much all the rest of the flooring, the ceilings, all new paint throughout. Doors are in relatively good condition. They just need a hardware upgrade. Then looking at some of the equipment, all the casework is at the end of its life, replacing all that. The marker boards are just resurfaced chalkboards, so replacing all the marker boards, replacing all the stage rigging and equipment, and then doing either refurbish or replacement of gymnasium equipment, and then replacing the kitchen equipment with the exception of anything you might have purchased new. And then the HVAC, this is, without reading through everything here, this is basically a full replacement of your whole HVAC system. You have currently unit ventilators in the classroom. We go to a different system that looks to do something similar to what you have at the other schools, some sort of package unit. The slope roofs makes it difficult to put on the roof, but figure out a solution to do a package unit with some sort of VAV box to control the temperature better. Plumbing system, not quite a full replacement, but a lot of upgrading all the fixtures, replacing your hot water heaters, doing an analysis of the piping. We think that's in good condition, but we would want to do some scoping or cut some pipe out and do some testing to make sure we don't have to replace any of the piping. And then on the sprinkler side, just adjusting the systems accordingly with any of the renovations. And then finally, on the electrical, replacing the main gear, the main distributions of the building, doing a lot of your low voltage technology upgrades, clock, intercom systems, replacing all your lighting with LED, and then kind of going through fire alarm, stage lighting controls, all basically kind of upgrading all your different low voltage and technology systems throughout the building. So cost, you can kind of deep dive into this later, but I'll just kind of give you the summary. So of everything we talked about there. If you go to the next slide, you'll see at the bottom, it's about an $18 million to $20 million renovation to do a comprehensive upgrade of that building. So when we move into the options phase, which is the next kind of step, you'll see that no matter what option we develop, you got to renovate Park Hills. So that'll always be in there, whether we add on to it or do something else around it. There will always be that option to at the baseline of renovating Park Hills. Any questions on? I know I went through that quickly, but I know you got a full agenda. So any questions on the existing facility conditions? And Mr. Osborne can field any questions as well.
I appreciate all the updates on a lot of the hardware and stuff like that. So
Sure.
very in depth, and appreciate that.
Okay.
It's a good ground to start from. Obviously, I think we need maybe an expansion there, but that'll be on top of what we have there.
Yep, correct. Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Fred, and he's gonna look at the updated housing data.
Good evening. If you want to go to the next slide. So if you remember last time I was here, we were looking at enrollment projections that included new students that were baked in as a result of any new residential housing. And the question is, based on the number of potential developments that you have online or soon to come online, do you need to consider a higher number of students in your planning process? I'll save you the next 10 slides and tell you the answer is no. But let me walk you through them and have you understand how I arrived at that conclusion. And then there are certain assumptions that I made in here that certainly if you said, we'd rather do it this way, that certainly is something that we can rerun for you. But over the past 12 years, if you go back one slide, you can see that the district's history, the residents over 12 years, you gained a little over 2,200, almost 2,300 new residents, 1,027 new households, 1,094 new housing units, but your enrollment only changed by 274 students, or about 6.69% over that time. And these are actual historic numbers. These are not any kind of projection in these. So because you've had a very, kind of constant, steady pattern, it lends validity into, well, how much is it going to produce given these numbers moving forward? Next slide. When you look at your history that have been very consistent, you have 0.37 students per housing unit historically. And I don't see that changing. You've seen that number through good times and bad times, even when houses went up and things went up and down. You were still very tight with these numbers. That 0.37 drives out 0.17 elementary students, 0.24 middle school students, and 0.37 high school students. So you actually need, at the elementary level, you need five and a half homes to get a single elementary student out of it. The middle level, you need 4, and the high school level, you need a little less than 3. So if you go to the next slide, this is a slide that you saw last time, but the number I want you to stick in your mind is that over the 5 years that the data was drawn for the enrollment study, you had 116 new residential units added per year. 116 units per year is what is reflected in the enrollment projections before we discussed any kind of increased residents as a result of construction. So if we go to the next slide, We were in contact multiple times with all the townships. Manheim Township, they was easiest data dive I ever did. They were like, no, we haven't built, we aren't planning on building, and any housing permits that we see coming in and out are simply going to be run-of-the-mill, upgrades and things like that. They don't see any potential impact on their school enrollment. In Penn Township, you've actually kind of reached your peak. You can see the report that they sent back. You had 770 units, 590 units that were accounted for. You have another 180 units that are kind of on the books, but it's held up. So we're gonna have to talk about how you want to treat that one. That'll be one of the points. But out of those 590 units, absent Mustang Point, there's only 101 left to complete. Next slide. The municipality, Penn Township, reports that given their current zoning, they're near capacity, and they really anticipate a slowing in the issuance of building permits of any additional consequence. So when I say of any additional consequence, it's, we're going to do a housing development with 100 houses, 50 houses, something that clearly might potentially move the needle. And they said they're pretty much at the end of being able to grant under their current zoning laws any big developments that are going to move that needle that way. Next slide. So West Manheim has got a lot of activity going on. There's 1,134 units, and there must be a math mistake there because it should be a little bit less than that units left to complete, but we'll pick it back. If you go to the next slide, it'll come back in. West Manheim Township also reported that giving their sewer capacities, they are reaching the end of their development. Unless they increase sewer capacity, they're anticipating that there is going to be a slowing in housing permits, particularly for any large residential development. So, I mean, the short answer is you've probably experienced the boom and you've hit the peak and you're starting to come down the other side. So what does that mean going forward? If you go to the next slide, these are the housing units within the district. So from any of the 3 townships that are approved and are yet to be completed. The township supervisors provided an estimate to how long they thought it was going to be until it was done. We looked at how long historically, because some of your build outs were, 10 years in the making. And we assigned a number of years until the development would be complete. You can see that all of these together will only yield you an additional 124 students. And because a lot of these are like final phases and those kinds of things, these should be included and are included in any data analysis. And the district, you're going to have to determine, do you feel comfortable given this housing unit that we're just going to evenly divide up the units that are left and push them out over the average build time that's taken them to get as far as they have. So if you go to the next slide, now here's, these are preliminarily approved. There's 131 units in the Joshua Hill development. It's going to be a bit before it gets started. I mean, typically it's going to take them a year to 2 years to really get permitting, mobilization, the first rounds of homes built, and then you start to see students come in. So we assigned it 2 years. Again, you could say, give it 0 years, give it 1 year, give it 5 years. But based on what we've seen happening, we assigned 2 years for permitting and mobilization. And then we built out 16 or 17 houses each of the years to reach that 131 total housing units that would yield you 48 students. If you go to the next slide. Now this is a big decision in terms of how you want the final report to look. Doesn't really drive the numbers that differently, but you've got Oakwood Hills that's pretty good and ready to go. We gave it 2 years. It's a smaller development, 69 homes. We gave it 5 years to complete. You add all those years up, you're gonna get back to that 69. Mustang Point, let me do Belmont Ridge. Phase 5 has got 8 homes, 203 homes left based on the way they've been building, the 8 years, 3 years for the final mobilization. Actually, they're not building that one. That's the neighborhood has been being built, but phase 5 has not been started. We've given it 3 years for planning and mobilization and then spread it out. And then the two that I think are pretty critical, particularly Burkentine Hills and Mustang Point, you have 1,062 homes on the initial proposal for Burkentine Fields. But that currently is in a bit of a limbo. The developer is negotiating with the township for zoning ordinances that they need changed. They want to bring it to a traditional neighborhood. They also want to take that and merge it with the final phase of Belmont. And when they're all done, the Belmont 5, Burkentine Fields would have 1,062 dwelling units. It sounds like it's going to happen. Is it going to happen in the time frame that you will be building space for students this cycle? Maybe, maybe not. You can see it does add 106 homes a year after things get ready to go. And we built out some time. Mustang Point's currently in court as well. I mean, they're pretty much approved, but they're having some legal issues. So I don't know what they are, but that's what the township reports. So we built them out after 2 years. All of these developments, if you put them in, will yield 560 students K to 12. The question is in modeling enrollment projections, you're not going to likely feel a huge impact within the next 5 years. And 5 years is really the kind of time frame where your enrollment projections have their smallest margin of error. After 5 years, anything can happen. Anything from the economy to building materials to, a development doesn't go in, a new development comes in. I included them in the first initial analysis so you can see what happens if we include them all. But that you might want to take this off and hold it for later. Questions? Okay, next slide. So here's what we did. If you take all of the developments, all of them, Mustang Point, all of them, there's 1,980 units, and we're looking at a 10-year build out on them. Some of them will go beyond 10 years, but we just built out what's the next 10 years going to look like. And you can see each year by year how many homes you can anticipate to bring online. And the question then becomes is that more than what's already built into your enrollment projections? Going back to that first slide, you were averaging 116 homes per year already baked into the enrollment data. So you could see, like for 25, 26, and 27, you're not anticipated to even get to 116 homes. I did not back any student enrollment out. I simply called it zero. So it doesn't, no harm, no foul. Once you get out to 2028, you can see now that some of these other developments are starting to come online. You're getting 7 homes, and you can see that 7 homes is only going to bring you 2.6 students. And you can see then going out all the way across, it follows that same format. And you drive out then, if all of these homes were built, you would have 67 additional elementary students, 36 additional middle school students, and 44 high school students. So if you go to the next slide, and the next one, thank you. So we baked into the formula for the enrollment projections the increased housing starts above 116. And you can see the yellow line, which is it lays right on top of that light blue line. The yellow line is the average of our enrollment projections, and the darker blue line that's just above it, I'm sorry, just below it, is the housing starts with the bumps. So you're right, you're right where you are. Your enrollment projections might need a little bit. If you go to the next slide, you'll see at the elementary level, with the enrollment bump, you would need 6 additional classrooms at the elementary level. When I was here last time, before we did the residential development, you needed 3. So if you add the additional potential for elementary students, because of the new residential development, it bumps it up to 6. I would say to you, that's 6 total. You may not need to build them. You may be able to carve them out of existing space or repurpose something. But if you're going to build them new or carve them out of something, you could potentially need up to 6. But remember that 6 counts that 1,000 plus homes that really aren't likely to impact much yet on your enrollment projections. Your next slide. This is something that switched since I was here last time. When we originally figured the capacity of your schools, we used the Pennsylvania Department of Education methodology, and that's based on what they would reimburse you for, and it ends up being 25 students per regular education classroom, art room, music room. Places like the gym get 66, but we followed the PD pattern, and at that point in time, your capacity was 1,530 seats. The way that you currently schedule rooms, when the kids leave their math, science, social studies, English rooms and go to art, music, phys ed, their rooms sit vacant. So it's not like a high school where you're going to have an art room empty out and another group of kids come in, and the kids that just left and went to art, they left the chemistry room. Well, now more kids are coming in the chemistry room. So when you allow for the way that you schedule, your district capacity is only 1,091 seats. So in that difference, you've got that 400 seats. Again, scheduling may help you get the additional space that you need without building anything. But that's if you continue with the scheduling that you're doing and the enrollment projections, you would need somewhere between 7 and 10 additional general education classrooms for your middle school. And I ran the high school just if I see it can make Scott get nervous. And your high school is, if you were planning your high school today, that is exactly where you would want to be planning to. So the high school is actually, it's looking like, over the next 10 years, you're expecting an additional 10-ish kids, and you're in a good place with that building. So that's kind of like drinking from a fire hose. Let me entertain any questions that you might have. Sure.
Are you saying that based on what the state would tell us, our current middle school could house 1,530 students, but the way that we schedule, the way that we operate, we only have a capacity of 1,091?
Almost. What the PD capacity tells you is that's how many seats they will reimburse you for. So that's the maximum number of seats given your enrollment that they would. But that does really tend to line up, particularly at the secondary level, to be like a junior high schedule. Times have changed. These things haven't been changed since the 70s. When teaming came in, then you start to use your buildings differently, kind of a hybrid between an elementary and a junior high schedule. And that schedule allows you 1,091 seats. If you went to a junior high kind of schedule where kids aren't teamed, they change every period to different places, just like they do in the high school, then you'd have 1,530 seats. That's why that 7 to 10 classrooms, if you want to maintain what you're doing, how you're doing it, you're probably going to need additional space. If you revisit your schedules and things, you can probably get by for the length of these enrollment projections, at least 5 years, inside that building without having to change it.
My question pertains to the elementary numbers. We saw the predictions on houses being built. Are there parallel predictions as far as people moving in, current residents having children, things like that?
All all of those things are baked into the
Those were in
projections.
those
Yeah,
numbers? Okay.
yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
As they were before. If all of a sudden you had a massive in-migration, then bets are off. But again, looking at your housing inventory, even with these new houses, the townships and municipalities are saying, we're pretty much over the crest and we're planning to come down the other side."
Yeah, I'm just thinking, as kids graduate from school, they're adults, maybe they're still in the district, maybe they start having kids. So I'm just trying to make sure we're looking at everything there as far as people having kids that are currently residents as well as moving in.
They would be baked into here.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was all taken.
And
into account.
if you go back, I think in the last PowerPoint presentation, you can see the breakdown of the demographics of the age groups in the district.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Rich.
So you mentioned the sewer authority.
Yes,
Have you reached out to them at all?
we spoke directly with the township supervisors.
Okay.
So
In the past, there was a moratorium because of the capacity, or the developments themselves were gonna have to create their own sewer system, basically, or treatment system. I don't know if that's what they were alluding to. I guess I was just curious if they were saying that they're kind of showing that they're at capacity again.
they're at capacity. And my real estate knowledge is,
Mhm.
an observer. The profit margins on residential building has become very, very tight with all the regulations that surround it. When you have to put in and maintain your own sewage treatment plant for a neighborhood, those profit margins get chewed up.
Yeah.
So is it possible that they could? Yes. Is it possible that they could adjoin to another sewer system in a neighboring township who would sell them capacity? Yes. But all of that is so what if. To build it into here, it's really just one of those things that it's hard to count.
All right. And the 0.37 per household that's not just new, it's just, that's the whole area. That's where, when you refer to being baked in, that 0.37 kids per household is pretty much hasn't changed. Regardless, future now, 5 years ago, now.
It hasn't changed in the past 12 years.
Right.
And, more houses, unless they are the right kind of houses to appeal to young families, not retirees, not 50 plus, then maybe you could get it up a little, but that's one of those ones it's really kind of hard to move the needle when you look at the number of housing units and the number of kids.
Thank you.
So first off, thank you for compiling all the housing data. I know that was a big lift, and I really do appreciate you compiling that and going through that very carefully. If we could go back to the 0.37, the chart where you determine that really that 0.37, that historical number of students we get per house, that really is underlying all this data, right? When we determine how many numbers we're going to get from this housing, that's really the crux of where I have my questions is I understand historically we've only generated 0.37, but does that take in, first off, my
Go
first,
back about more.
yep, right there. So could you go over exactly how exact this number generation is? Because to your point, the way I see the housing we're putting in, they are predominantly more single-family homes, which is going to draw more students than it has historically. Are you seeing that trend as well, or
That trend is not. a-
in our
and-
housing?
And yeah, any increases in students per household over the time that the data was drawn for the enrollment projections, it's 0.37 and it's very consistent. That would include any increases that you would have seen in there. So again, the question becomes is, do you want to bake in more because you believe the type of housing is going to change and the type of people that are going to buy those houses in turn are going to change?
Yeah, that's exactly my question, because historically, like Penn Township, which is almost built out, how many single homes did they build versus row houses versus, I think what we're building in West Manheim um, lends to having a higher student population incoming. And I guess that's the question I'm asking.
Um, there's, I guess, no, there's no really easy way to measure consumer behavior and model it into here. And that's really what you're
Right,
what
because
you're
that's
talking
that's
about.
this number, right? It underlines everything. If we can't,
It-
that's the variability in our
Back
calculations,
one
right?
more slide. Y- Yeah, I mean, it's, you could see over this 12-year period, your change in enrollment was only 274. Your change in housing units was about 10%. So it's it's a crystal ball if you want to change that number. What I will tell you is the 0.37 is the best mathematical placeholder that you have available to you. If you as a board believe from interacting with your communities that your number of students per household is going to go up, then we can build to that number. That's some of the decisions that you have to make. But when it comes down to what can be mathematically modeled for the likelihood of a future event, this is it.
Okay.
I have a question. So in speaking to Matt's, the 0.37, I mean, there, in my view, there's not much that's going to change that unless you can speak to the fact that your county's birthing rate has like jumped, hugely. Like all of a sudden, we're now having, 30, 40% more kids in
Yeah,
a
and
year.
The
Like if
opposite.
that's not happening, then I don't see how that function changes.
Yeah, it would just be from in-migration. The other thing that you could happen too is, 50+ communities this close to the Maryland border are, those are, the profit margins on those goes up. You could see more of those housing units come in, and if you were doing strictly units per student, your units where your students would drop. So again, it's kind of that crystal ball as to what you think might happen. But if you look at these numbers over time, I should have put in the other one that actually showed you never really go up or down from that 0.37 over 12 years. And remember, that 0.37 included that housing boom that you just experienced. And the next set of houses is not supposed to be that much more than really than what you've already have baked into the equation.
Yeah, I was gonna add, just as quick math, when you take the number of housing units of the last 10 years at 1094, sorry, just doing some quick math, take the last housing units of the last 10 years at 1094 and your change in enrollment 274, that's actually a lower rate than 0.37. It's actually 0.25. So obviously there's some moving out of kids that accounts for that, but that 0.25, you would expect that, if you're thinking that there's more students for these newer houses, that would be a higher number. And then you made a comment about birth rates. So PDE's projections, actually one of the things they factor in are birth rate, new birth rates in there when they do their projection model. So that's kind of accounted for in that on that side of things. So.
Right, it really comes down to the type of housing that we have coming in, what supports more kids versus less, right? And you cite those numbers, but those numbers don't identify single family home right? That's really what I'm speaking to. But yes, I appreciate, like I said, I appreciate the
So
numbers.
if you go to one of the slides that shows the township housing developments, go another one. So go one more there. So you can see in West Manheim, which is your most active, they're all single-family homes except those 355 townhouses. And then that Burkentine Fields, it's kind of maybe not, has some townhouses, I think 400 townhouses in as well. So, and if you go back to the Penn Township, there you go. Again, look at the number of housing units that are completed, and it's a good cross-section of single-family dwellings, townhouses. You really, again, you don't get a big boost in students when you got all those different kinds of housing units coming in.
Right, and that exactly illustrates the point I'm trying to understand here is, so the Penn Township, we didn't see a large increase, but that's because it was a multitude of different types of housing. West Manheim, we're just, for the most part, we're majority single-family home development, right?
I think I'll have to do some figuring, but I don't think you're talking about like 0.37 to 0.4. You're talking
Okay.
about like 0.37 to 0.3715 or something like that.
I'd
It's just-
appreciate that analysis.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I'm speaking to, and that underlies all our numbers. So if we can say if it was all single family, how much would that bring adjust that ratio up? That would,
That will require, yeah, what we would need to do is we would need to download, we don't need student names. We would need their addresses, and the buildings that they attend. We would plot them on a map, and then you'd say to us, okay, this is a typical neighborhood where we get a lot of kids out of. It's single-family homes. This is a townhouse complex. Circle this one, and the computer will tell us how many kids you're going to get out of those different types of housing.
gotcha.
And I'll be happy to do that for you if you want to release that information and take the time to do it. And again, I'm absolutely unopposed to doing it. From my experience, it's not going to move your needle much. As a matter of fact, you know what the biggest thing that did move your needle? When we changed your average class size from 25 down to 22 to see what the district looked like, it drove out double the number of elementary classrooms that we had. So that's why we left it at that 25, because it was just getting to be, you're just kind of at that point where you've got enough sections that if you peel off 3 kids a section, you need a lot of extra classrooms.
Did you guys consider all the homeschool, charter school, cyber school, any of those numbers? I mean, obviously, since COVID, those numbers have gone up dramatically. So I think some of the numbers might be skewed because of that as well.
Well, no, because we looked at your rate of growth prior to the pandemic. So we used enrollment figures that we were testing against prior to that event. And it's kind of, we're using older, more aggressive numbers than what you had now, because you had that 2021 dip. If I remember correctly, you came up,
Well,
you
that's
know,
my
pretty
fear
much
is
back
if
to
we
where you
lost
were.
those couple hundred people, but we gained them in some of these housing developments. On paper, it looks like we didn't grow that much. So, and that was actually going to be my recommendation is we have a transportation office. I'm sure they can look at a development and say, we pick up X amount of kids where they just built 65 homes, and we'll see if the 0.37 stands the test of time in that neighborhood.
Oh, but remember that you can't compare the 0.37, which is district-wide, to a neighborhood, which is, you might get a really high number in a neighborhood, or you might get a really low number in a neighborhood. Then it picks the average, but it doesn't change it won't change it. You know what I mean?
I think when we're adding as many houses as we're looking at in comparison to the percentage of houses that's previously built, it might change it some.
And what I would say to you is, we're not opposed to building as big as you want to build. But I stand here to tell you, based on all the numbers in our experience, this is basically what is a good planning number. If you think that you're going to get more, but they're not going to come in the next 5 years, you can begin to look at things like, well, what happens if we build the school, but we make sure that the library, the parking, and the gym and cafeteria can hold another 200 kids, and that the ends of the wings can very easily be adapted to take 2 stacks of 8 classrooms on the end and bring those extra 200 kids in. I honestly would tell you that trying to anticipate and build for homeschool kids and developments that don't have shovels in the ground is a risky venture. You'll come out one side or the other. You'll come out brilliant heroes because you are ahead of the game, or you'll become out villains because you committed an awful lot of tax dollars to empty space. And I know that's a hard place to put you in, but really, this is it's so much easier when the data says, oh my gosh, guys, you need another elementary school, or oh, you need this, or you need that. It just, no matter how we push it, and some of these estimates, again, are conservative. Conservative in, we're trying to end up on the high side of things. We just can't produce more than what's already baked in there.
Yeah, and I think the other great thing you have in your planning here, and whether it's a coincidence or not, is the next project down the road is West Manheim. So you have the ability to say, all right, let's make our reaction now based on what we feel are concrete numbers. And then if that does happen, or you do experience that additional increase, 2030 is your next project. Right there is your solution. You add that space to West Manheim.
I do want to ask one last question. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
And that is the 22 versus the 25. I still want to see those numbers.
Oh, yeah. When we develop the options, so the baseline option will have, that was something I was going to talk about as our next step. So we'll develop baseline options that are built around the 25, and then we'll say, all right, if we go to 22, how many more additional classrooms
Thank you, sir.
do we need?
I appreciate that. Thank you, gentlemen.
How much does that cost as well? Yeah. So segue, that is our next step. So we're going to be back here actually pretty soon again in a couple weeks. We've already been kind of underway with the options. You know, obviously we know Park Hill is an option, and looking at a few different things with the administration. We'll come back in February and review the first round of those options. So we'll have them developed as far as layouts, costs, and factor them into, you know, the 22 versus the 25 classrooms, things like that. We'll be able to answer any questions, say, all right, can we tweak that or look at this a little differently, and be able to make any modifications and come back hopefully in March with that final, all right, here's where we're at and here's where we want to go. Okay. Any final questions?
Just to thank you
Okay.
for all the time
Thank
and
you.
work you've put
Yeah.
in so far. It's
Absolutely.
been a very interesting process to watch. Can't imagine how much it is to do in the background.
And your administrative team behind the scenes is doing a lot of work too. So they very quick to get us the information we need.
Awesome.
If you want to, I've got most of those. If you think of any other things that you want to consider in there, let Dr. Burkhart know, and he can email me, and I can run some other numbers, and some other scenarios for you, and you can take a look at how much they vary from this.
Okay. This brings us to our overview presentation of the proposed draft of the 2025 to 2028 Southwestern School District Comprehensive Plan with Dr. Frew.
For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to queue up the presentation. Mr. Schild is going to do that. It is the entire central office team that is actually going to be talking to you tonight, not just me, even though I've been sort of leading the project. The red folder that you have, it matches the digital version of all of those documents I sent to you last evening. And just before we even get started, all of those digital documents are what will be available on the website after we go through this. That will be available for public comment. So just so you know, everything that's in the red folder, it's all going to match up to what's digital that everybody will be able to see. We anticipate many, many people reading every part of what we have over the next several weeks. That's my challenge to the community on this project. So thanks for letting us talk through this tonight. We are going to give you a high-level abridged view of this because there is no action until the end of March. So this is like the first blush at this, and we will look forward to in meetings in February and March, continuing to get feedback and questions about all of this information. So if you could, Mr. Schild, to the next slide. Really what we're going to do is three things. We're going to give you a very, very quick overview of the whole process. You participated in pieces of it. It's not going to be unfamiliar to you. We're going to look at the PDE, our own process, what we went through. Then we're going to get into highlights of the plan, which is I'll point out the document in just a minute from your red folders, but we are going to talk about really three key things: the goals, the evidence-based practices or our action steps for those goals, and then the professional development and communication related to that. And then the last slide will be final steps toward adoption, what you can expect after today. And we can certainly address questions, although I would strongly encourage us to just kind of hold them. And when we come back for committee of the whole and meetings in February, we can certainly dive deeper into maybe some of the things that you actually have. So as far as future ready comprehensive planning process, if you can go to the next slide, please. This is the state's approved model for what we're doing right now. We have a shared vision for student success that focuses on three areas: leadership, teaching, and learning. So everything we're doing, it's not complete operations of the district. It's really focused on leadership, teaching, and learning. That cycle, we set the direction, assess the needs, and create a plan. That's where we're living right now, those three phases. Once we adopt, which is hopefully at the end of March, and then we will submit to the state March 31st, that's that white space between the create the plan and then we implement the plan. And then we'll have 3 years to implement this plan. We'll monitor it during those 3 years, and then we'll adjust as we need to, so that in 2028, we can do this all over again. And then we will continue this process for perpetuity. Who knows? It'll be a very, very long time. Next slide, please. This is something that you are a little familiar with. Back in May is when we started the process. We began an organizational window at the very beginning. There are 3 phases to the comprehensive planning process. We have them broken down by time blocks. Those time blocks are in there. If you could go to the next slide, I'll kind of highlight what we have done in each phase. Phase 1 is what really happened from about August until the beginning of November. And there were 4 things that really occurred in that spot. We had the vision, mission, and values work that we talked about in our subcommittee meetings back in September. We had 3 subcommittees that were formed, and we had asked everybody during those subcommittees to kind of bring to light what were some of those key issues and concerns that you might have. On the left-hand side of your red folder, there's a single sheet paper in there. It's called significant statements. That second bullet there. I would just encourage you to take a look at those statements. At some point, you will see a highlight of what the subcommittee came up with, saying these are really important issues to us, and it's all part of the data collection. So that's why I'm just pointing that particular piece out to you. If you also remember, back in the end of September, beginning of October, we did a stakeholder needs assessment, went out, open for several weeks. We actually then collected that information. Also in your red folder, you see all of the graphs. The results are in there. I know we talked about that during our subcommittee meetings as well, but it's in there for your reference. And then one of the big pieces is the Future Ready Index, which is published every year by the state. That came out at the beginning of November. It's not been fully analyzed at the community level, but it is a part of our planning process. So when you look at the plan that we have, you'll see reference to the Future Ready Index. That's because we've looked at that data as an administrative team, and we've used that information to help guide some of our goals and our pieces. So that was all phase one. Could you go back just one more minute? I'm sorry, could you go back just for one more second? Because when we get into two, phase two, the subcommittee meetings in November, there's a synthesis document that we had listed out several goals from all of that needs assessment work. Those goals, all of that stuff in phase one are taking us into phase three, which is where we are right now, which is our proposed goals, our action plan, our professional development. So that's really the high level view of how we got to where we are and why what we have is not just a whim. It's really based on a ton of work and analysis and discussion around it. I'm going to turn it over to somebody else, I believe.
Good evening. This slide, this image, we utilized back at the very beginning of our stage one, where we talked about our Mustang core competencies, and we looked at these key areas and what we want to build into our structures here at Southwestern. This was developed by many teacher leaders and administrators through the course of the year, and we looked at these key areas, thinking of it as a portrait of a graduate student here. And ultimately, as students graduate, these are the key areas we want students to be strong at, and that we would build our curriculum in that. So again, thinking back in phase one, or the first meeting that we had, these were the core pieces where we used to look into our mission and vision. Dr. Smale will talk about those.
So if you move ahead to the next slide, and keep that graphic in mind, again, alluding to what Dr. Cromer shared, if we have students who leave with a strong high proficiency of those six competencies, and are highly proficient in those areas, they're going to be able to be successful whatever they decide to do, whether they decide to go to college, or decide to go to trade school, or be an entrepreneur and start their own business. They're going to have the ability to be successful. And that's what we want of every single one of our kids. So when you look here on this slide, one of the things we tried to do, you look at our vision, our mission, and our shared beliefs, we tried to weave and align those six competencies, into that. So you take a look at our vision there, empowering students with knowledge and confidence to embrace opportunities. One of the things we wanted to be very succinct with that. Ideally, we want every staff member to be able to recite that vision. And we found in the past that although that was ideally wanted that to happen, it was too lengthy. So we wanted to be very succinct and to the point. But then when you go ahead and you look at our mission, you look through there, you see the words adapt, collaborate, communicate, think critically, create, persevere. Those are all things that are part of those competencies. And when you go and look at the shared beliefs, again, you see a lot of those key words in there. So we really wanted to bring alignment. So there was consistency between what our competencies are, what we want kids to leave us, what kind of skills we want them to leave us with, and then that's interweaved into our mission and our shared beliefs.
So in the red folder, the actual plan, it's a 21-page document that looks like this. And if you want to go ahead to the next slide, Mr. Schild, actually the next one after that. So what you're going to find is that there are several sections. Now, I think that the copying did not give you the page number when I started to look. So I'm just going to refer to the document by section, and I'll do my best to kind of walk you through. Again, you have the digital access of this, but for the sake of right now, I'm just going to kind of reference the section itself. Section 1, a lot of this is the state makes us create and do this in a certain way. They make us go and list out all of these strengths and challenges, but we're only allowed to select 4 that actually make it out of this first section. So that's why when you see, if you kind of scroll to, I think it's page 3 of this document, and you start to see some yeses and nos, it's only because we're limited to how many yeses we can actually identify, which is, again, just part of the process. I'm just letting you note that. I'm not going to spend time talking about strengths and challenges right now, just so you understand that particular element. Section 2 is the goal setting. So we've used all of this data. We talked about all of these surveys, all of these significant statements. We did a lot of synthesis level work. And what we have come up with to propose as part of our plan are essentially 5 goals. The first blue item there, it says priority, and the priority states this: focus on the organizational systems, the leadership effectiveness, and the communicated clarity of the district's vision for learning, so that all students' academic, social, emotional, behavioral needs are met across the organization. So I'll highlight three things: organizational system, leadership effectiveness, and communicated clarity of vision. We want to really focus on those three things, and our two goals to help us get there are to, number one, look at employee engagement to increase effective contribution. That's across the board. We want to look at retention data. We want to look at exit survey data. We want to look at climate survey data and see how are we doing to engage all of our employees across the organization, because we believe if we are stronger leaders, clear in our vision, and have the right organizational systems, that we will be able to increase and enhance the employment experiences of our staff. So that's one of the goal areas, and that definitely came out in a lot of areas of our subcommittees. Related to that is the leadership development. That's a second goal. And what we really want to look at, you can see the goal itself is to increase 100% of district leadership team to use data and communication systems for the consistent monitoring of learning progress and instructional effectiveness. We believe if we focus on the leadership systems, the leadership skills, the communication skills, we can increase then learning progress and instructional effectiveness across the organization. So those are two pretty big goals, but they're all related to those three areas. I'll turn it over to, I think, Dr. Smale for the next one.
So our next goal, focuses on strengthening our comprehensive multi-tiered intervention of services for students. And that's academic services, social emotional services, physical and behavior development across all of our groups. So when you think of teaching and learning, really break it down simply. First of all, we think about what do we want our students to know. The second piece of that is how are we going to measure that they've learned what we want them to know. And then the third part is what are we going to do to the students when they haven't demonstrated that they've learned what we want them to know. This is that tier 3. So how are we going to support the kids who don't necessarily learn what we need them to learn? The piece that has changed a little bit with this is we have a pretty strong system with how to address kids academically. Over the past few years, we've seen an increase in the number of kids. We've talked about this, is well documented, the kids who have mental health concerns or behavior concerns. MTSS is a little more comprehensive. In addition to addressing those behavior concerns, those academic concerns, it also works to help to address those behavior concerns and social emotional concerns. So we're going to take a long, hard look at what we're doing that already works. We're going to do some training. We're going to do some professional development, and then we're going to work on a process to make our MTSS system more robust. So we are addressing students succinctly when they have needs. And our goal ultimately is to hopefully get to a point when we can do that and address those needs, and hopefully we'll see perhaps maybe a decrease, I'm having trouble talking today, in the number of kids who are ultimately referred for special ed services.
And our fourth goal, as we walk through the academic portion of this, we have actually the fourth and fifth goal. If you turn the page back and forth, you're going to see some similarities, but I'll focus on the literacy piece here. Focus on literacy development across all subgroups in K-12 in the area of curriculum, instruction, assessment, with intentional structure surrounding data analysis and relevant professional development. So that was an area that we wanted to focus on the literacy side. We have the same structure goal on the math side as well, which is goal 5. And this was a piece that connects into what Dr. Smale was saying as far as the MTSS system. But one of the things that we want to focus on is utilizing data for decision-making throughout the course of the year. So we have our Future Ready Index. We have the data that comes out in our PSSAs or Keystone, but we want to move into a system to where we are analyzing data as we go through the course of the year in a much more systemic manner. So goal number 4, as I shared, was on literacy development. And goal number 5, excuse me, is on that numeracy. And these are K-12 goals. So this isn't just a elementary or just middle school. So we're looking K-12 when we're looking at both of those.
So that'll take us to section 3 of our plan. And the way that we have to create an action plan at the state portal, we align it to what are called evidence-based action items. And so what we're proposing is 3 evidence-based action items. All 5 of those goals we just mentioned will be met when we focus on these 3 evidence-based action items, all right? In the next couple of slides, we're going to point out what each of these look like at, again, a very high level. But what you're going to see is a systems alignment evidence practice focused on a framework called Leading Modern Learning. Dr. Cromer is going to talk about that. A science of learning framework where there are 6 phases when you think about brain-based research of how people actually learn new content. There's a 6-phase framework that will help us really focus on how we're making instructional effectiveness and learning happen. So that's the second evidence-based practice. And then the third one is the 9 characteristics of high-performing schools. And Dr. Burkhart's going to share a little bit about that one and how that's going to launch us into our professional development and communication plans. There is an article in the right-hand side of this red folder about that 9 characteristics. Just again, as you're kind of processing through content, there's some good information that help you to explain a little bit more about those characteristics. I'll turn it over to Dr. Cromer, though, on that systems alignment framework.
So this is actually a framework that we've been using for last couple of years. And this is really, if you think about how our curriculum writing process is, and I've talked to you about these pieces. I know Dr. Friel has talked in previous years with the board on how we develop our curriculum. And we utilize this. One of the things when we're looking at, we are writing in long-term transfer goals. How are we connecting those? And think about the transdisciplinary goals, which are the Mustang core competencies. They fall down the left-hand side of that column. And think about your standards that we have that we write are on the right-hand side of the column. We've been doing a number of those things on the right-hand side, but the left-hand side is where we want some of those other skills, those portrait of a learner. We want to build those into our curriculum. As those documents come, we look and see where they fall in, and then into also stage 2 and stage 3. This doesn't only apply to, and you should be on about page 7, I think, if you're there. This doesn't only apply to tier 1, it does connect across to tier 2, to our MTSS goal, and to our tier 3 goal, or our tier 3 instruction with students as well.
So when you take a look at this graphic, cognitive science indicates there's essentially 6 phases of learning. When you think about teaching, you think about the art of teaching and you think about the science of teaching. The art of teaching is how we motivate kids. It's the relational part of teaching. But there's also a science part of that as well, and it's very logical. And if you take a look at these, you start with getting kids interested in the learning, and then you get them to make a commitment to the learning. You focus on the new knowledge. You have them work to make sense of learning. You give them an opportunity to practice and rehearse that learning, and then extend it and apply it. How is it applicable to real life? So one of the things we want to do with our staff is really, when we think about lesson planning, we want to really focus on these 6 phases of learning. There's additional strategies that we're going to attach to each of these 6 phases, but we want to get our staff to where there's a point where it's common nomenclature across the board, and we approach teaching and learning by focusing on these 6 steps.
And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the 9 characteristics of high-performing schools. And I'll kind of repeat what everyone else has been saying. You see a lot of these words that are in the goals that you've read to this point, in the action steps that we've taken. Like, for example, collaboration and communication. That includes effective leadership with teachers, as well as with the parents, as well as with the students. In the broader sense, you see the 4 supports: school, community, district, state, and nation. And you work through the effective leadership as we center in on how all of these things come together to support the students. So again, if you look back, you'll be able to tie this directly to different components within the plan and how we're effectively using these and helping to make our students successful through the effectiveness of the school. And one of the ways we do that, if you go to the next page, is through our professional development. And you see the 4 focuses there that are going along with the goals that you've seen. But this is a work in progress. The professional development hasn't been decided upon yet in terms of the specifics of it. The topics are there, but this will ebb and flow as we determine the needs of the kids, the students, and obviously the standards that we meet every day from our state and even on our national level. And then finally, for my part, when you go to the next page, the communication plan, obviously you've seen the revised district missions and values, and then the framework that we're hanging this on, and then communicating with you so that it's presented to you, and then it's a living document for our staff, our students, and our community, because this will guide us from everything in how we plan our instruction to how our teachers receive their professional development to how we monitor and assess our students through classroom observation, district assessment, future ready index at the state level. And all of this again feeds back to those goals that we mentioned earlier. And this gives you the idea of with the framework that which it'll hang.
Okay, so the last slide, if you could, Mr. Schild. So here's where we are. The next steps, you can see the table here with our outline of where we're heading. This information will be available on our website starting tomorrow, available for public comment. There's a form that we will be able to have. We'll be able to collect people's responses as well. Now that technically is going to go through February the 6th, just to give them some time. We can talk about it at our committee of the whole meeting on February 3rd. After we get a little bit more feedback, if we need to extend that, we have some time to extend that so that people have a chance to weigh in on the information that we're sharing. We'll then take a look at that, review, revisions, if we need to make any adjustments, all along the way, of course, at our board meetings over throughout the month of February. As we get feedback, we'll be able to look at that, apply feedback, make adjustments to our plan, which will then bring back to you again on March the 12th at that discussion meeting. Any revisions that we have, we can talk a little bit more in depth about it at that point. After we have a discussion, no vote yet, the vote would actually happen on the 26th of March after we've really had some time to digest, make adjustments, and go from there. Our PDE submission date is March 31st, so we just have to have things really wrapped up by then, okay? And that concludes, I believe, our presentation for this evening.
Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Friel or his team this evening? There's a lot of reading to do. Thank you. Okay. This brings us to number 8, additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda.
I do have one. I need to remove 12A2 for that PCA position. We are currently utilizing 51 out of 57 board-approved PCAs, so I don't believe we need it at this time. So I would like to remove number 2 from 12A.
Okay.
You need a motion, a
Yep,
second?
we need so we have a motion on the table to remove item 12A2. A second from Mr. Galazella. All in, is a voice vote acceptable? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith.
Mhm.
All right. This brings us to number 9, hearing of persons who wish to address the board. Just as a reminder, board of director meetings and committee meetings are open to the public, but are not public meetings. School district residents who wish to make a public comment should sign in prior to the start of the meeting and request to speak during public comment. While there are 2 public comment sections on the agenda, you may only speak at one. The first section is for agenda-related items only. When called to the microphone, or when you come to the microphone, please state your name and township for the recording of the official meeting minutes. So I have 3 that signed in today, only 1 to speak on an agenda item, and that is Miss Denise Bunty.
I'm Denise Bunty, and I'm a resident of Southwestern. I want to pray. Dear Heavenly Lord, may you keep our students safe as they go through this winter. Give our school boards, administration, teachers, and bus drivers, staff wisdom as they make decisions and the plans to have the students succeed, Lord. Lord, we thank you for the coaches, the support personnel that is going to be employed. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else that would like to speak on any agenda-related items before we continue? Okay, thank you. All right, this brings us to number 10, action on minutes. We have 6 sets of minutes listed under this section. Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, cloudy topics for any of these? No? Hearing none? Okay. We don't need to vote on this one, right? All right. Moving forward, student representatives. Esme, you have been sitting so patiently, and I am so grateful.
So starting off with the sports, girls basketball has a record of 10-5. Girls wrestling has a record of 8-4. And swim has been doing good this season. The girls team has only lost to Dallastown. And the girls and boys both won overall at Wilson Relays this past month. And they had a girls relay break a record. And student council is getting ready for our snowball dance next weekend. They have a work night right now, and Diversity Club is hosting a teacher versus staff basketball game in February. And our senior class office finished their R&K sub sales, and they made around $1,000. Those are all the updates we have for now. Oh, wait, actually. And then it's also School Board Appreciation Month, so we brought some gifts for you guys. Should I pass them out now?
If you'd like to, it's not necessary, but thank you very much. So because the public can't see what's in the boxes, and I am always just so incredibly impressed and grateful, they made us beautiful plaques that say Southwestern with our names on them. And these are for all the extra cars I don't own. So it's fantastic. This is beautiful. Thank you so much. And please extend our gratitude to everyone that took the time to remember us. It means a lot.
I'd also like to say you've become part of this board as well, and I thank you for your dedication showing up here. I'm sure you have better things to do, but you come very regularly and give us updates, and I appreciate the time that you give to us as well.
Were you over setting up for Snowball? By all means, go back before it gets any colder. Did you walk? Okay, good. Okay. So actually, when I saw you walk in, I thought about that, and I don't think the students were at the organization meeting when we switched the time. So I am so very sorry, but also you missed out on a great half an hour. So moving forward, our full board meetings, the regular board meetings, will start at 6:30. If that is inconvenient for your schedules, by all means, come when you are able. Certainly your education comes first, but we love having you here. So moving forward, these regular meetings will start at 6:30. And thank you for the cupcakes. Everybody good to keep going? Okay. All right, this brings us to number 12, matters for which board action is required. 12A, Personnel Committee, Mr. Smith.
With the exception of 12A2, I'm making a motion to approve the entirety of 12A.
Second.
Okay.
I have a question. And I'm not sure exactly who it gets directed to, but as far as the coaches' salaries and the stipend, that's all part of the CBA. So that's when that gets negotiated, or changed. And I'm assuming that's a pretty small group, so it probably doesn't come up.
It's part of the negotiation process, so it's
Okay.
part of the collective bargaining agreement.
So I don't really know the history on this stipend or when it was created or when it came about. But it feels like the dollar amounts are forever ago to me. Like the $100 for 5 years, $200 for 10 years. So, I mean, in my view, it feels like we could add a zero to those to make them have a little more oomph.
But
As
that's something
to-
that needs to be discussed during the next CBA negotiations. So that's not something we do here during this time.
Well, I'm asking questions. So it's something that I think should be addressed, the next one.
Does anyone have any other comments for?
So just a question about, we have 2 coaches that we're bringing in for esports. Do we know how many students are involved in esports? Okay. Just going back to, I don't know where we're at with this, but going back to the request for additional coaches for the track, long distance or cross country. And I, I don't know if we've worked this out. I realized that there was some negotiation things that had to happen. But my understanding was the number of coaches that we had was kind of set, and that there was a possibility of pulling from here or there. And I guess I just am wondering why, if there's a necessity for 2 coaches in esports, I imagine these kids are sitting in seats, not running around, probably in one room. Whereas we had our cross country coaches 3 miles behind their students and trying to keep up with them. So I just want to verify that we've taken care of that issue before we bring in 2 coaches in a group that sits in the same room, and I can't imagine what kind of monitoring they need.
So short answer is yes, the track coaches have been fixed. And to bring up Mr. Plessik's point, the dollar amounts is in the CBA. But Mr. Mummer, do you want to explain how the numbers of how many coaches get assigned to the sports? Like, where is that located at?
That was done historically through a process where the coaches council came to us with a matrix based on the number of students, based on the number of contests, based on the number of different criteria, like 10 criteria that they would look at. And that's how they determined levels and coaches, and that's all part of that collective bargaining process. So it's not something we just pick out of the air, it's part of the process.
So the track coaches, there was an open vacancy from another sport that we
It was a field hockey
moved
vacancy
over
that we moved
to
over to cross
the
country.
track, or cross country, not track. And then we agreed that we were gonna eat the cost of the second assistant
country.
coach whenever that comes up.
And honestly, I don't have a problem paying a varsity assistant esports coach $2,000. That's in our budget. That's peanuts. But my concern is, did we have enough for other areas? And if we only were limited to so many coaches, we should be maybe taking care of other areas before we're compiling them all in that area. But
That'd be a question for Mr. Mummer, if we
Mr.
can,
Wareham.
or Mr. Wareham,
And
if
I-
we can move
No.
spots around if needed.
No,
part of the-
that's
it's
a
part of the
collective bargaining agreement. That's agreed between the association and the board, and it's a contract. So that will be addressed. If there's questions about that, that would be addressed in the next collective bargaining agreement when that would come up. We did work out with the association, one of the vacancies, and you being the board, added a position. So you could do that through an MOU, but other than that, these positions are set.
And it sounds like from Mr. Mummert saying it was kind of set a while ago, and we just kind of been.
Yeah, so
going
they're
along
set,
with it?
they're classified steps, if you will, but esports is new. And so
Right,
that
that's
was,
why I
yeah,
was-
so that was set as part of the last agreement.
Okay.
So that's when it was negotiated.
Which we're set in for how long now?
This is year 2 of 5.
Correct. As was middle school soccer, we added that in too. And that was added into the contract.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, hearing nothing else, roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Lighty,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Item 12B, Finance and Support Services Committee, Mrs. Bauer.
Thank you. So first I'll ask if there's a preference from anyone as far as how they might prefer I break this up, as there are quite a number of items, or if you want it broken up.
I'm good with all of them together.
Good.
Okay.
Everybody good?
Well, then, thank you. I make a recommendation for items 12B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Second.
A recommendation for Mrs. Bauer. First, second I heard was Mr. Gelsinger. Someone was in my left ear, though. Did you get the last one? Because we went right into questions. Did you get the second? Okay. I didn't get a chance to repeat it. I apologize.
All right, so items 1 and 2 are November 2024 financial reports and payment of fund bills. Items 3 and 4 are December. And then item 5 is the annual adoption of the Act 1 resolution. Item 6 is the approval of the LIU general operating fund budget. And item 7 is a recommendation to approve a board resolution adopting the tax collector compensation rates for the years 26, 27, 28, and 29.
Any comments, questions, anybody? Okay, hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Lighty,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Item 12C, Program Committee, Mr. Beard.
I make a motion to just approve item 12C1. It's a recommendation for a client services agreement with Soliant Health. It
Second.
is a
I have a recommendation from Mr. Beard and a second from Mr. Lighty. Any comments from anyone? Mr. Beard, anything? Okay. We've done this one before. Yes. So roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Lighty,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Item 12D, Buildings, Grounds, and Equipment Committee, Mr. Plessick.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion for 12D, items 1 through 6. It's all basically disbursements.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Plessick and a second from Mr. Lighty. Okay. Seeing no further comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Lighty,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
All right, I'd like to make a motion for 12D, item 7, which is the grant permission to Columbia Cottage to use the West Mayenheim Elementary School as the evacuation point.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Plessick and a second from Mr. Smith.
Just a question. Usually these are mutually agreed, correct? If we have an issue, we also evacuate to them. That's a shared responsibility.
In this case, no, because it's not large enough to house us. It would only be one way. But typically, to your point, Mr. Lighty, you are correct. If it was with another school or another large area, we would have a reciprocal.
Like Spirit Trust Lutheran is from West Manheim out there. That's a mutually shared evacuation, I believe.
I'm not familiar with that one, so I would say if it's large enough, yes.
Yeah.
And then we also have with local school districts around us as well, that not in the event of a man-made or a natural disaster, because typically that would be more region-wide. But if we had an issue where we lost power at one of our high school, 2 of our buildings, we might be able to go to them or they would come to us. So typically there is a reciprocity, yes.
And for the public's information, we had asked Dr. Burkhardt about this, is that if in the event that this would happen, we would section off areas and children would not have any contact with people from the outside.
And we shall hope it never happens. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Weaver, Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
12E, Student and Community Relations Committee, Mr. Lady.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 12E1 and 2.
Second.
Thank you. Their facility, first one is a facility usage, and the second one is for the wrestling program.
Any comments, anyone? Okay. Hearing none, roll call vote.
Mr. Lady,
Yes.
Mr. Plessick,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Beard,
Yes.
Mrs. Brennan,
Yes.
Mr. Gelsinger,
Yes.
Mr. Galzella,
Yes.
Mrs. Weaver.
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
12F, Policy Committee, Mr. Galazella.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. I just wanted to, while I don't have anything to act on today, I do want to highlight that we will be holding a policy committee shortly. In the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be setting that in, and it will cover policy 201, 815, 830, 830.1. And we'll also be potentially adding a policy discussion on teachers being allowed to have their own children attend the same school with them, and adding a good of the order section to our agenda. And anything else that the board would like to consider in that policy meeting, I'd please just forward it to me, and we'll add that as well.
Okay, thank you. 12G, Mental Health and Wellness Committee, Mrs. Brennan.
Thank you. Well, I don't have an update for the committee or a meeting. If you can indulge me for 1 minute, because I do want to update on the mental health. So in order to prepare for a meeting, hopefully within, I don't know, 2-3 months, maybe out, what I'm going to start doing, barring this snow weather nonsense that we're getting goes away, I'm really starting to meet with various people in the district. While I already know that the school district has many programs, topics, speakers, and whatnot that they bring in for a myriad of things at the elementary, middle, and high school for students and teachers. I wanted to make sure that the public and fellow board members and fellow employees of the school district, that they understand really what mental health is, because I think society has this really convoluted notion that mental health means mental illness, and it does not. Mental health, we all have. Mental illness is not the same thing, and they are not mutually exclusive, but they can be. So kind of bringing the understanding to the public about what mental health really is, because I also think that society does not understand that drugs, alcohol, bullying, behavior falls under mental health. Most people that have drug and alcohol issues are dual diagnosed. There's something else going on that leads them to that use, which we have a lot in the district, teens, adults. So kind of bringing that understanding and trying to hone in on what already we have going on in the district, because we do have programs and topics and speakers and stuff already going on. Kind of me getting the clarity, understanding the details, so that then I know where to go moving forward and what the school may or may not need, or what I can help with, or that kind of thing. Also, something that we also don't seem to understand is that behavior is part of special education, and kind of understanding what special education is. Because special education does not mean people are bad or less than. So that's something else I want to bring into the mental health committee, like the understanding of special education, kind of give some more numbers and things, and the understanding of the special education departments here as well, which I will be going to the schools on Friday as well. So kind of all that to say that, which includes like emotional regulation, communication, and all that stuff with the students, teachers, and everything else. So hopefully once I get the details and honing in on all that, then I can figure out what we may not need, or just kind of what's going on, and get a meeting hopefully within the next 3 months.
Thank you. 12H, Negotiations Committee. 12I, Safety Committee.
I'd just like to highlight, this week, I did meet with, Mr. Osborne. We went over to Bearsville and we discussed, additional protections we can put in place to protect our children as we arrive and dismiss from schools. So, they're protected by bollards and benches and whatnot to just add an additional layer. I think going forward, we'll have additional on that, but I think that's a good thing to look at, just to add another layer of protection to our kids.
Thank you. Number 13, legislative/PSBA report and/or related action. Does anyone have anything? No? Okay, moving on. This brings us to reports and related action. 14A would be the solicitor, and we have Mr. Walker filling in for Dr. Dalton.
Thank you for having me tonight, but nothing to report. Thank you.
14B is the York County School of Technology. First would be the Joint Operating Committee.
So I just got to rub this one in because tomorrow night's probably the best meeting up at York Votech. For those of you who don't know, we get served a phenomenal dinner from the culinary students up there. So unfortunately, you guys were not invited, but I'm sure it's going to be a great night. Dr. Burkhart, I'm sure you're joining us as well.
Very much so, yeah.
That's wonderful. Have fun.
Yes, I do look forward to that dinner. They really put on a great show. It's the pomp and the preparation they put into it really is top tier dining.
That's awesome. Anything from the authority? The York County School of Tech Authority.
After
No, I don't
that
have
meeting,
anything.
after that fine dining, we will have an extensive meeting where we will cover important matters.
There's nothing to report from the authority.
Jay, did you have anything to add as the superintendent of record?
Just that they're also undertaking a feasibility study, and they'll be wrapping that up shortly, and they're looking at, obviously, expansion of programs and then the addition of other programs as they survey the community. They're noticing that there are, for example, mechatronics is a need established, and so that's part of that process too, and it's moving almost in lockstep with ours, not because they were designed that way, but that's just where they are in the process. So we'll be bringing that forward to the board once that's all done too.
14C, LIU.
So aside from the already updates we get in the emails from the LIU, nothing to report there. As far as the York Learning Center, due to one of our meeting schedule changes, I had to pick which meeting to go to, and I came here. So I missed that one. However, the next meeting will be, I believe, in March. And I'm already in communication via email with getting our numbers for how many students and such we have going on at York Learning Center as well. So I'll be obtaining that too.
14D, Recreation Committee. There hasn't been a meeting in 2025 yet for the Recreation Committee, but it will be coming soon, as we usually do meet in February. So that will come soon. 14E, Superintendent's Report.
Just real briefly to reiterate your points, Mrs. Weaver. Thank you to Mr. Osborne, his staff, Mr. Harrell and his staff, our building staff, our teachers, everybody in these last few days. We've gone from snow to extreme cold to, who knows, maybe next week we'll have a heat wave, hopefully. But thank you to them because they all don't miss a beat, and everyone's patience and understanding as we navigate this odd cold. And then also, I was said earlier with your presentation, but on behalf of the administration, just a very sincere and deep thank you to all of you who sit around this table as volunteers, and you're charged with and have to make decisions that impact students, staff, taxpayers, businesses, you name it. It's not an easy position, but I hope you know how much we administratively and across the district appreciate what you do. It certainly doesn't go unnoticed, so thank you on behalf of our team.
14F1 would be Assistant Superintendent Dr. Friel.
I have no further report for tonight. Thank you.
Just to highlight a bit of your report, I am very appreciative of the fact that you included the retention numbers in your report. Obviously, it is always our hope that people would like to come and work here, and more importantly, that they stay when they come. There's a lot of cost in hiring there's a lot of cost in hiring, and hiring the right people and taking the time and doing the process saves you in the long run. So I am very grateful to see that our numbers are very low. We do have openings. That's not lost on anyone that wants to look at our vacancies. They're there. And I think that is typical to every school district in the country, not just us. But I know that that was something that you had set as a goal for yourself to get that data synthesized, and I'm very appreciative of that report.
Thank you. I could speak much to it, but I won't because of tonight, how much I've already spoken today, but.
I had a question for you though.
Yeah.
So in looking down through, your retention report, it looks like the PCA section, we're missing a few PCAs here and there, but West Manheim is missing 3, whereas Bearsville's missing 1, Manheim's missing 1, Park Hills is set. Is there are we gonna move some around, or do you expect to have those filled soon, or?
Yeah, actually, it relates to why we removed that agenda item earlier today. We have 57 positions that have been approved, and we are currently at 45 employees in the district hired. Of those 57, we have several that we contract with a service that still doesn't take us to the full number. So what's tricky about doing the calculations of these numbers is that it reflects both people who leave and people we hire on a given month, and that does fluctuate. We do lose more people in our support staff. Sometimes people are moving for maternity leave, for example, or there's a lot of rationale to it. We typically do not try to move people around. We don't have the luxury for that. When we hire PCAs, they're often assigned for specific needs for a particular student, for example. So we do try to honor that, and we've not had to reduce, like saying you have a job this year and now you don't have the job. Although we could say that, we don't have that luxury because there's always a need for it. So I hope I answered your question.
Just that, I mean, is West Manheim doing okay with that lack, that, I mean, are they, it seems like they'd be struggling.
I think
missing
they're
3.
doing just fine, but I could ask Mr. Kump if he wants to respond a little bit to that. I'm sure I know he has actually been hiring. I believe he's maybe making a recommendation for a PCA.
Yes, there was one PCA on the board recommendation this evening. And then one of the openings is filled by one of the agencies that we work with. So we have pretty much full staff, so we're functioning well.
Okay. And then, also I saw that we're still down 3 psychologists.
That is correct. That's why we have these contracted services in that we approve. We are right now doing the best we can. We have some hopeful news. It does look like that position has been open. We've opened and closed it multiple times. Dr. Smale and I have talked a lot about it. He's excited because it looks like we are getting a couple of interested applicants, which we will hopefully be able to bring forward on a more permanent basis, and we don't have to continue to work through, I'm going to call it piecemeal services, although I do believe that the people are doing a good job
Well, I looked
for
at
who we
the
have.
chart on
but-
what they're doing, and
Sure.
it looks like they're doing a very great job of
Right.
staying steady.
Yes.
But I can't imagine the logistics of trying to get them lined up, whether it's I don't know if you're Zoom meeting them.
I believe
or
it's 3 virtual psychs. Is that
virtual
right? That we
sessions,
have
so
now, Dr. Smale?
Seems like it could be
Mhm.
very difficult and problematic, but it does seem like they're getting a lot of stuff done, and they're staying caught up with our needs.
You don't need to, but.
Yeah, the two who have been working with us full-time, Michelle Flores and Nicole Thompson, they are doing a very good job. There is a logistical side of it though as well. And there is a part you lose because our principals have regular meetings, and the face-to-face psychs are typically part of that, and they discuss kids pretty significantly. And so that's the value that we get back when we have the face-to-face psychs. So.
Dr.
Right.
Smale?
I don't have to, I'm sorry, can I
Okay.
make one comment on that. We know that it was a very challenging situation that we walked into this year when we lost all 4 of our psychologists last summer. So we really are, that's not the norm. That's not what we want. We're working hard to try to get that to be regulated, but we are still kind of reeling through that and really trying to work hard. And I do credit Dr. Smale. He's really doing a good job of staying on top of that. Sorry.
Thank you. I just do, I kind of led it to this in email earlier today. The pending evaluations we have, I thank you for what you've given us as far as what they're doing and the evaluations that they're ongoing. But that piece that I was asking for with the pending, like how many aren't even started yet, that speaks to Mr. Leidy's point of with those missing psychologists. I'd like to know, are we backlogging significantly with the virtual psych? Are they keeping up? Or is that building a backlog?
So earlier in the year, it was a pretty significant challenge. So we did a really good job of keeping on top of things. We are starting to see a little bit of breathing room. It's not perfect. But to your question, we have a spreadsheet, and in that spreadsheet, we have our students listed by who's within 60 days of an evaluation. And we also have on there the permissions to evaluate that are currently out that we have not received back yet from parents. So that is data that I can share with you, and I will put that in my next report so you can kind of look at that.
Okay, but we're not significantly backlogging. That was the main just.
We are not.
Okay.
Again, but our psychs right now are doing a lot of testing, and we're not getting a lot of those other services that they typically are able to do for a couple reasons. Even as virtual psychs, they have the ability to zoom in and be a part of meetings and talk through kids, but they are staying pretty busy where some of those other opportunities to interact with staff are not as prevalent.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe we brought this up before, but do you think wages is the issue? What's the struggle with finding the right people for this role?
We have tried to address the wage issue, and you want to speak to that,
Yes,
Dr. Burkhardt?
People, and that's a position that lends itself to virtual, and a lot of face-to-face employees in the past are now providing a service virtually.
Virtual opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've tried to address that through wages, and also working together, we've identified ways where we might be able to make some of it hybrid, where when they're writing the report, they may not necessarily have to be here, but when they're working with the students, our choice would be that they are here. And then some people are interested in face-to-face full-time, and those are the ones we're pursuing. And fingers are crossed because there does seem to be some interest.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Considering that challenge, if this continues where we can't find those roles to fill, have we looked at teleservices doing the less face-to-face work for lack of, normally, as I understand it, we have a caseworker follow the same child extensively. If we're not able to fill those psychologist roles locally, couldn't we then parse the work that would suit to telehealth versus, and then have the face-to-face be spread among the in-person
You would look for a blend. I think what you're getting at is if somebody had to do an evaluation or run a group and work with students as a group, the face-to-face would work with the group, and then the writing of the report could be done.
Right.
Sometimes they're called ghostwriters. So Dr. Smale, to his credit, has really been as creative as he could be. Ultimately, it's our hope that you see more of a return back to hey, we want to do this face-to-face because of the connection you make with the kids and really the authentic, that authentic connection to get a better evaluation. Not to say virtual psychs don't, they do. But I think collectively, our administrative team would like to see it more face-to-face.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not advocating
Right.
for less
Oh,
face-to-face,
no, I
but I'm
know
just
that,
saying if we
right.
can't fill those positions, I think we should start looking at hybridization
Right.
of how we handle that.
Right.
If it continues that path.
Yeah, and we will continue to do that.
Okay. Business Administrator, Mr. Jeffrey Mummer.
Nothing in addition to my written report. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'd like
Direct-
to
Oh.
ask him one question
Of
related to
course,
that.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, full questions tonight. I know we addressed the cell phone tower negotiations, that's in your report. Should we expect a meeting to go, your report says they presented us their response. Is that where we're at right now in regard to that?
So I've just gotten from them on Friday, from their legal department, their response back. I have not looked at it yet.
Okay.
So I have to compare that to what we had submitted prior to that to see what the changes are.
Okay.
Probably have to have a meeting then with our negotiations committee with that information, and then we'll meet with the board at some point in time and start to move forward with the process.
Okay, thank you.
Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Dr. Brian Cromer.
Nothing beyond my report.
Okay. Director of Accountability, Comparability, and Reporting, Dr. Eric Seibel.
Dr. Seibel is at home enjoying his birthday with his family. So happy birthday, Dr. Seibel. I hope you're not watching.
Director of Special Education, Mrs. Cortina.
Mrs. Cortina is under the weather, so I hope she's feeling better and not watching.
Director of Pupil Services, Dr. Jeffrey Schmale. Any questions for Dr. Smale? Okay. Director of Technology, Mr. Patrick Shield. Everybody good? Okay. Elementary report. Middle school principal, Mr. Winters. Uh-oh, here he comes. That's okay.
So just two things. The audio enhancement company has been here working back in December, and when they finished up over winter break, the person that was here just gave a lot of compliments and kudos to our maintenance team here at the middle school for just the way that they received them and the accessibility that they had with them. They said, the guy said he's been doing this for about 8 or 9 years, and this was the best maintenance staff that he had ever worked with. So I just want to give a shout out to our maintenance staff here at the middle school. And then also January 13th, our 8th graders visited the York County School of Technology, and they wrote back to myself and Mr. Wilson, who accompanied them, that our staff was the most engaged staff that they've ever had interacting with the kids. They just didn't sit down and let, the kids go be with the York County people. They engaged with them. They went around with them. So kudos to our staff that went along with them as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Great,
Don't
Darren,
go
thank
anywhere.
you.
Uh-oh, nope.
I think this would also be a good opportunity for you to highlight the social media and drug intervention you're doing for the parents.
Yes, so
I think
if
we should sell
any
that 'cause it's a great.
parent of an EHMMS student is out there watching, you have until Sunday at 11:59 PM to register for the social media and drug awareness symposium that we're having here at the middle school. It'll start at 5:30 with a dinner provided by Giovanni's Restaurant, and then the Penn Township Police, York County Too Good for Drugs, and the York County District Attorney's Office will be talking to parents about peer pressure, drug awareness, what to look for, also dangers of social media, and how to help with social media presence with bullying and those types of things. So we encourage people to sign up.
And
For
that's
the-
next Wednesday, right?
Yes, next Wednesday, the 29th.
For the people watching, is that just parents or is
That
that
is-
also the kids?
Just parents, and I shared a recent update out today about that, and I'll be sending another one out on Friday.
Love that you're doing that. It's a great way to spin up parents on info that they might not be aware of, that the things that their children might be exposed to. I'm not saying it happens here, but it's, sometimes it does, and sometimes it's just good to know, have that knowledge to be aware of it. And I appreciate your efforts in spinning that up.
I also wanted to say thank you as well, because I didn't know that was going on. So I'll add that to my list of what goes on with those topics for me. So thank you.
High school principal, Dr. Downs.
I do want to thank the board for the asynchronous day for Keystones, and I want to thank Ms. Felter and Mr. Strauss for all their hard work that went into planning, organizing, running the Keystone exams for the fall semester year for the winter Keystone. So again, I want to extend a thank you to the board for allowing us to have that asynchronous day. It was very successful. We felt it ran much more smoothly, having the Allergen ELA in one day and being able to get through that. And in addition to that, I wanted to add that tomorrow night, sent out several calls to our community, is our spring semester Meet the Teacher night. And then on Thursday, February 6th, is our 8th grade curriculum night. So I'll be sending that out tomorrow. Just want to make sure that families are aware that that is coming up. I know it's on the district calendar, but I'd like to send those robocalls to let people know. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one
Yeah.
for you. So this was actually Ms. Felter's part of the report, so hopefully you can help me out on this. But I was looking over some of the discipline summary, and it seems like we had a little bit of an elevation over last year, but mainly driven by cell phone violations, which we didn't have any of last year.
Okay.
So I would say it was like 40 some cell phone violations, and if you take those off, we were actually fall under last year for other disciplinary matters.
Yeah.
So there are some areas in there in which I could talk about and compliment that we are doing much better in. Cutting class went from 48 down to 7. There's failure to serve detention went from 51 down to 25. So I acknowledge that. My concern was some of the behavioral issues that have risen. So profanity has gone from 7 incidents to 22. Insubordination has gone from 8 to 42. Disruptions have gone from 15 to 32. So these seem to be more behavioral focused and acting out rather than process focused and procedural. So I was wondering if you had a comment on that, what your thoughts are on that, and if it's maybe that we're just addressing things that we were letting go before. Maybe it's not a behavioral change at all, but that we're addressing them more.
I think our dean of students and our assistant principal, Ms. Felter, and myself, we're making it very aware to our staff that we need to hold students accountable. So I think you're seeing an increase definitely in the cell phone thing because, we've gone over it and over it with our staff to say, hey, this is our expectation in all of our classes. So we need to be consistent and enforce that. And I know our teachers just in the past couple of days, starting a new semester, they're really enforcing the fact that when kids come in, if you can't keep it in your pocket, put it in the, door caddy, just to make sure they're not a distraction. Again, always trying to work with our students to make sure we're all on board with that. So I think you see an increase in that because we are holding kids accountable to that, and our staff is definitely doing that. Our dean of students, our assistant principal, myself. When it comes to insubordination or profanity, I don't have an answer why that's increasing. I don't know. Sometimes you see those bubbles, for a couple months or whatever is causing that. Again, it could just be our teachers are more aware. We're definitely having our teachers in the hallways. We're having our teachers monitoring behavior. The hallways are more crowded now because of the hallway being closed. So maybe our teachers are hearing more when they're in the hall and they're saying, I heard that. Wait, who said that? Come over here. Because definitely the hallways closing that middle hallway, the flow is much more slow and, crowded in the halls. So I think that could be an increase, but I'll definitely talk to our 2 deans and our assistant principal tomorrow and see if there's anything else I'm missing on that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully it's that we're addressing a behavior that might then go down in the future and
Yeah.
not seeing an actual rise.
Yeah, so, for me personally, if I see an increase, if it's consistent, all spring here, then we have a problem. If we see a month or whatever that we see an increase, then sometimes it's a good thing because we're holding folks accountable and being consistent. So we'll see how it goes, but I'll definitely talk to them tomorrow.
And profanity is one I can absolutely see that might have been let go at certain areas that maybe now we're addressing. And
Yeah.
that could be, I'm hoping that's the situation.
Yeah, and just maybe not even heard, because now there are more people in the hallways and the teachers are out there monitoring behavior. And so maybe they're just picking up on it more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you could look into it for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So independently, same comment in that, except that I calculated it as insubordination up 30, disrespect up 30, disruptive up 17. And again, if that's because we're focusing on it, I applaud that. I think it's really important as a district. Anytime you have students being insubordinate, disrespectful to teachers, that creates a whole culture of it, that if you don't stop it, it just balloons. So if that's because we're of a renewed focus, I encourage that and thank you for it.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So I also want to thank you for that too. But I also want to add, because, and I can't speak for our students specifically and who each one of those students are, but historically and currently right now, the trend, at least in your county, the more accountable they are, the more they're going to act out. So the cursing, the behavior, since we have Ms. Broadback now doing more and being more dean, Ms. Felter and all that, kids historically, when they're getting held accountable more, they're going to act out more. We're going to see more of it. Also, it's a behavior that could come from the home. We don't know because we don't know I don't know who these kids are and what their lifestyle is. So we don't know what's going on, but there could be a multitude of reasons for these cursings, behaviors and whatnot. So by holding them accountable, they can only do so much. But I can promise you that typically kids, when they know, oh no, they're coming after me, they're going to act out more until they don't act out more. So, thank you.
Dr. Downs, you mentioned the success of the asynchronous days for testing. Have we considered that for next year yet?
I haven't asked yet, but I'd love to have it in May because May is going to be definitely busy with AP exams and they do overlap Keystone exams. So that's going to be a mess in May with the renovation and the cafeteria being, in the process and the gym. Yeah, definitely. I didn't ask yet, but I'd love you to think about May,
We would love.
I'm going to toss
We
that
would
out
love a
there.
presentation of ideas, considering our last board meeting, we spoke very in depth about next year's calendar, and
Yeah.
we've already seen or noticed several issues with it. So
Yep.
that would be another thing to potentially get on that calendar as early as possible, so the parents can know when their kids are going to be off school or
Yeah.
be taking tests.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, I'll definitely work with our team tomorrow morning and start looking at dates and seeing what we can come up with. Because the state sets the Keystone window and AP College Board sets the exact date of the AP exams, but they do overlap.
Speaking of having space, another thing I just thought about, I know that we're working on renovating the lunch area and cafeteria is now in the gymnasium. Is that correct?
No, not
That
yet.
happened yet?
No, not till mid to late March.
Okay, all right, good, because I was just worried about where we were going with junior achievement, but
Yeah,
we're in good shape then.
correct.
Okay, thank
Yep,
you.
Yeah. And that's coming up here in February, so we should be good to go. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Happy New Year to all. I just have one quick thing that we just learned since I turned in my report last week. If you all remember back in November when you approved some independent bowlers for us, this year they bowled alongside the new Oxford team at the Hanover Bowling Center. And two of our bowlers had a high enough average that they can now enter the independent district bowling tournament. And then all of the independent bowlers who are in that tournament, the top six, get to go to the District 3 actual real tournament. So Cole Kurtz and Carter Thurston have a chance to get to the district tournament. And that independent tournament is on February 1st. Any other questions?
Just one question. If we had an update on the parking along the road, dangerous situation over at the high school.
We have addressed, we've sent it out to our parents and our coaches to send to our winter sports families. And then Mr. Osborne's office also sent it out to the youth programs who also use our building, and they're part of that parking along there as well.
Yeah,
Doesn't help that it's
hopefully we
0
see,
degrees right now, though.
well, hopefully we see a response to that, because
Right.
every time I'm over
Yeah,
there
it's
waiting,
like you
I
can't
see
get out.
kids running up through in between cars and I'm like, oh no. It's just, I have a heart attack every time I see
know.
that. I'm
Yeah,
like,
we've
oh.
definitely addressed it with our winter sports, and we've sent something to the youth wrestling. So
Yeah, hopefully we can see something change with that soon, because a lot of us go through there and it's like, you can't even pass cars through there.
Right.
So,
And going back to about the negotiations and all, moving forward, if the athletic director, if it's me or whoever it is, in the next negotiations could be somewhat a part of that, that would be very helpful. Just with the coaches and however many coaches are in each sport and things like that. All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
To that point, the reason I wanted to prompt you was to ask you directly, how many do you see currently the sports we have? Do we have a missing amount of coaches in any specific area that you can identify right now that we need more?
The biggest need was assistant cross country because of the number of kids, the novice kids being here, the high level kids being here, and it's 90 degrees when we start.
Right.
So cross country, if that's taken care of for next year, that is a big help. Coach Joey Wilderson would stand up here and tell you that he needs a golf assistant, and we're starting to get more kids playing golf, and they are also spread out on the course during
Okay.
fall. But I don't think there's any super glaring right now.
Okay.
It would be nice to be able to maneuver some things around, but right now I think we're okay.
Okay, thank you.
But thank you guys for addressing the cross country situation. Coaches are very excited about that, and I think it's a good thing for our safety too. So, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to 15 comments, questions, et cetera. 15A, Southwestern Education Association, Mr. Matthew Lawhead. Item number 16, correspondence. Okay. Item number 17, other matters for board consideration and/or action. Does anyone have anything this evening?
Yeah. Mr. Osborne, I know we had spoke earlier in the week, and I was wondering if you could provide an update on the renovations in the Bathroom Middle School and possible timeline.
So the last few weeks, manpower wise, has been quite challenging with the moves at the high school, the weather. It's just been tough. We had a conversation yesterday to kind of rededicate priority to the renovations to the restrooms upstairs. We had two guys on it yesterday. Unfortunately, today we had a guy call off sick again, so we're back down to one. So it is our intent and effort to stay on that and see it to the end. Hopefully sometime next week, we should be able to see that.
And that's kind of where I was going, is I wanted to ask that we get 7-Eleven on the agenda for the next meeting. Do you perceive that we will be finished that by the 3rd of February?
It would be my every intention to have it done by then.
And as I mentioned before, I would appreciate maybe a walkthrough. I know a couple of us wanted to walk through to make sure that it met the requirements of our new policy. So just let me know.
Sure thing.
Nate,
Good.
do we have all the materials for that
Yes,
on site at this point?
to the best of my knowledge, it's
Okay.
all there.
So I would just ask that 7-Eleven be up for board approval on the next committee of the whole meeting on the 3rd. Pending
Pending completion.
completion of the restroom and verification of anybody who wants to take a look at it.
Okay. All right, this brings us to visitors. I had Mr. Stephen Carr sign in to speak at the end.
Stephen Carr, Meanham Township. I guess I'll start off with the positive. I did read the superintendent's report. There are some interesting numbers and very impressive as well. And I did read the special education report this evening that Miss Rebecca Cortina did, and that's also very impressive. And now for the very depressing parts. So in regarding to item 11C1, with the Soylent Health has 2 lawsuits against it from 2020 to 2019. Soylent Health failed to provide reporting pay time, pay employees for all hours, pay overtime, pay minimum wage, authorize or permit meal breaks, authorize or permit rest breaks, furnish accurate wage statements. Soylent Health also broke breach of contract. And the second one against SLF Sakura Law Firm versus Soylent Health. In this lawsuit, Soylent Health fails to properly compensate its employers for the time spent in orientation training that is specific to their assigned facility, which does not advance their job skills or careers, does not provide premium pay to employers who miss their meal rest breaks and as required by California law. School districts should hire direct again. ProCare Health and Sunbelt Health are also under Soylent Health, which are horrible health services. And this one question is, how many special education students enroll in the school year in the district? And then regarding the housing and units, I say that we anticipate and see what comes up, because like Mustang Point, it's being approved, but they got lawsuits against them. And then one was I think was the Ridge, whatever it was like 12 years. So, I mean, we can anticipate what is coming and be vigilant to see what pops up. Because like the guy said, there's some of these are single family homes with only 355 that are actually suited for huge families as well. So I think if we do a preemptive attack, we're wasting money, taxpayers' money, which you guys already promised to not, take and not raise. And so if we just kind of went forward and been vigilant, keep an eye on these developments, that we can go maybe like 2 or 3 years into or before it starts developing and so forth. And that was all I had.
Thank you. Any other visitors that would like to speak this evening? Moving on to number 19, for the good of the order. Does anyone have anything this evening?
Sure, I'll start. Thank you. So I want to, need to kick the table. As I take the table out, I'm very happy for the good of the order. I want to congratulate the TSA students, the Technology Student Association, the winners from the competitions last week. We had a lot of winners, both district within Southwest, as well as students from York Tech who won awards, ribbons, and also wish good luck to the middle school 6th grade robotics club who have an upcoming competition as well.
Thank you, Mrs. Bauer. Anyone else?
I'd just like to make a point of order that we shouldn't be adding agenda items without at least a board vote. We had a discussion, but we didn't make any board vote on that.
We decided to do it temporarily until the
Temporarily?
policy, until the policy committee added
Okay,
it.
that's right. Okay. I stand corrected.
We were gonna see whether we liked it or not.
Yes, that's right.
And then just to add on a little bit here to what Mrs. Bauer has said, and I think I've said it before, so I certainly don't want to repeat myself too much, but I think our district does an excellent job at providing opportunities to all students for the different passions that they have in life. We've heard from Mrs. Brennan about the music program and how uplifting the concert was. I also got to sit through that, and it was like nothing else I've ever seen. And I've sat through quite a few concerts and been in quite a few concerts in my life. I think the science opportunities, the esports opportunities, the fact that we don't just say, you have to be good at this one thing, this is what we do here. I think it's wonderful. I hope to see it expand. I think keeping children connected to each other, keeping them connected to the community that they live in and the schools that they attend has a huge difference in their lives moving forward. Oftentimes, one you don't see until they're grown adults and they're telling their children, man, there was that club I did in school and I hope you have something like that that you can do. Because oftentimes I don't think we realize how much we are shaped until we can look in hindsight. So to all of the teachers that donate their time or are compensated for their time, because it's still time, I am so appreciative. I think that we have so very many things in this district to be proud of, and I think she had a perfect segue to that. So thank you very much.
Because they weren't brought up earlier, and I'm a little biased, but I would like to just give a shout out to our varsity basketball team. They've had a rough season and they played some rough teams. I know because I'm going to bubble wrap my child because of the injuries he's had. But they're doing well and they fight for their team and for their game. So I do want to give them, some kudos because they've been playing rough teams and they have been playing hard. So kudos to our varsity basketball team, boys basketball team.
All teams.
All teams, but I'm partial.
Anybody have anything?
I wanted to kind of echo what Mrs. Weaver and Mrs. Bauer said. Like, I'm really hard on my kids. Like, you don't realize how good you have it. When I was your age, we had one choice for lunch and we had an alternate sandwich if you were allergic. That was it, And I'm really hard on them about that. Like, good thing you didn't live when I did. We have so many opportunities in this district. It's crazy. Not just food, not just sports, but everything. Everything is very impressive. And yeah, it continues to impress me all the time. And we have great administration as well as support staff. So
Excellent. Hearing nothing else, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Meeting adjourned at 8:53 p.m. Thank you all very much and be safe getting home.
Oh, did it actually fall down?
Did I break the table?